से. History that was taught, at least taught to me in school, was the most boring subject. And it was mostly about kings, queens, dynasties, and I was least bothered about these chaps. I wanted to know what the common people did, little people like me. What were their lives all about? What did they eat? What did they wear? What did they do? And there was hardly anything in the history that was taught in school textbooks, or even in college for that instance. And that is what sent me on a quest to find out more about commoners. And one of the sources which was very rewarding in this quest was the oral tradition, oral histories, oral narratives that, you generally ignore, historians ignore. I thought these were great sources to know more about our ancestors. I hope. I'll have to, the slides. Okay, let us continue and hope that the slides come on. Oral narratives themselves. Are they important? Do oral narratives play an important role in our lives? Are myths and legends essential for society? And are stories that we heard as children from our grandparents, are they just mere figments of imagination? Or is it more of an interface between history and fiction that was being told to us? Now, we have this great Indian tradition of the kahani. I'm sure most of you must have heard stories, even in this age. I think there still are grandmothers. And I don't know why it's mostly nannies who end up with the responsibility of, carrying on these oral traditions. Zubair Rizvi, a very famous poet, in his very popular poem, Hindustan, Ye Mera Hindustan, says, Raja, Rani, Gudda, Guddi और परियों की कहानी बच्चों के झुरमुट में सुनाए बैठ के बूढ़ी नानी माथा चूमे लोरी गाए ममता की दीवानी ये है मेरा हिंदुस्तान. तो ये कहानी is a very integral and very important part of growing up, or at least it was till recent times. But I still think a lot of grandparents carry on that tradition. Now, how far do we take these stories that were told to us as children seriously? Most often, they are too, outrageous, too unbelievable to be given a second thought. But for some strange reason, we remember them throughout our life. Even in the old age, like in my age, when I sit with my grandchildren, I, recall the stories that I heard from my grandma and try to pass them on to the younger generation. So what is it? It cannot be, just figments of imagination that were put together by some creative genius long time ago that is being repeated time and again. It cannot be that. There has to be some element there which keeps these stories alive. Either an individual, an occurrence, an event that happened, something which is the seed around which the story grew. And then there is also the important fact that we, as all societies, not just Indians, like to have our history told not in those bland terms that you have in school textbooks, but in embellished history, which also gives us some fun to listen to. Now, all these things point out that the stories that have been carried on for generations and generations, for hundreds of years, there has to be some element, some at least residual element of truth in them for them to have survived, sustained, and nurtured over centuries. Now, one summer evening, long, long ago, when I was a kid, all the kids of the neighborhood would gather in a house because my Nani was one of the greatest storytellers that I've heard. And in the evenings, she would narrate stories. There would be of all sorts, morals, history, myths, legends, mostly fiction, I think. But then there were also facts that were conveyed through these stories. And one of the facts that, came through, is that it is important for these oral narratives to be passed on. Because you might not believe in them right now, but something might come across some event, some evidence later on, which might make you change your opinion about these oral narratives. And that is what happened to me. On one such summer night, as I said, all the children were gathered around Nani, and she was going on about the history of the great Qutub Shahi Sultans, about the kings, their valor, their powerful armies, the diamonds, the treasures, the love stories of kings and commoners of Qutub Shahi times. And then she said, diamonds, were of different kinds. Some were found in the mines, some from other sources, but all of them were traded at the Hira Mandi in Golconda. There was this market in the fort where all diamonds of this area were traded. She said, we know the diamonds that came from the mines, but what other sources? She said, well, there were this strange breed of goats found in the hills to the north of the Golconda fort. And you found diamonds in their droppings. I said, enough. Even at that stage, I put my foot down. I said, no, this is enough. This is going too far. Now one just cannot find diamonds in the droppings of goats. Dani insisted that, it's so written in old big books, important books of that area, contemporary histories. I said, no, it cannot be. This cannot be a fact. I cannot believe this. Her baat aayi gayi. We went on to even more bizarre tales as bedtime stories. Years later, I got some funding from IFA Bangalore to do some work on the architecture of the Deccan. And then I thought I should read up on the history of Golconda if I really want to work seriously on this, and I started reading histories. One day I was reading what is called The Relations of Golconda, a collection of narratives of travelers who had visited Golconda in the 17th century. And there was this one relation by a guy called Methwold, who was a factor, British factor in Chennai, then Madras, who had come over to the Qutub Shahi court. And while reading his narrative, I come across the mention of these strange goats of Golconda again. Methwold says that in Golconda, you find the goats that bear the famed bezoar stones. Now I was struck by lightning. I said, what the hell is this? How can you have goats? Again, flashback. Okay, Nani telling me that there were diamonds. I didn't even know what bazaars was, what a bazaar is till then. I'm sure some of you might know, but most of you will not know what a bazaar is because bazaar is no longer important. I went on in search of information about bazaars and found that they are what are locally called zehar mora, an antidote to poison. It is a pulverized mass, dense mass, intestinal calculi found in the stomachs of animals, mostly ruminants like goats. And for some strange reason, they were so coveted in those times that carat for carat, they were sold at a price more than the diamonds of Golconda. Now just imagine, over centuries of retelling, the story where there were bazaar-bearing goats of Golconda, which produced stones that were used as antidotes to poison, had transformed to being diamonds themselves, because they were costlier than the diamonds of famed diamonds of Golconda. Golconda diamonds were very famous. You had Golconda had gone beyond being just a place name. It was a synonym for wealth, plenty, prosperity, windfall. Can anyone tell me how many Golcondas are there in the world? More than a dozen when I last counted, and including 3 in America. A mine, a river crossing near a mine. So every other mine in the world, every other place where people had this hope of finding untold wealth was named Golconda. You know, Golconda was the only source of diamonds in the world till the Brazilian mines were discovered in 1730, 1740. And what happened? When the Brazilians tried to sell those diamonds, no one bought them. They said, no, diamonds can be found only in Golconda. So as a marketing strategy, the people who were selling Brazilian diamonds had to rename not just the mine there as Golconda, but the district as Golconda. Only then people started buying those diamonds. So you have this district, Golconda mine in Golconda district in Brazil, which became, of course, a competitor later on. That was the allure of the diamonds of Golconda. So it was but natural that something which was costlier than even those diamonds would be transformed over time into diamonds. And that is why I personally believe that every myth and legend, every oral history that is told by our elders needs to be, at least, even if you don't believe in it now, they need to be conserved, preserved, and repeated and handed over, passed on to the next generation. Because this is inherited heritage. This is our inherited culture. These are our inherited traditions. They need to be passed on because someone later, somewhere down the line, a person like me might come across some evidence which will prove that what is being considered as a pure myth, legend, a figment of imagination today, in actual fact, something which is not very far, if not exact reality, not very far from reality. So I think that is very important. I had an image which I would have liked to share with you of bazaars and goats. Of course, one goat in particular, my cousin has this goat, which takes some perverse pleasure in butting me in my behind every time I go to his house. It was, I think, the similar breed because even today, in the districts of Nizamabad, Adilabad, and I think Nalgonda, the bazaar goats are still found. People do still take out the bazaar stones from these goats. They are still coveted for other reasons, I'm told, not as an antidote for poison now, but they are still there. Uh, so, you know, you never please dismiss any myth and legend, any story that you heard from your grandparents as being totally a myth and a figment of imagination. Because I have been convinced, and I firmly believe now,